All right, 4, 5, 4, 6, 4, 7 notes. I told you this is a lot of work, but it's going to be really easy. Okay? I don't lie, right? All right. So, the first thing we got to do, right, is know some certain rules. Okay? And it's about congruent triangles. Okay? So, all we're going to do is learn these 5 rules of congruent triangles. Okay? So, there's 5 rules. There's side, side, side. Okay? What that means is, if this side is congruent to this side, and this side is congruent to this side, and this side is congruent to this side, then these two triangles are congruent versus side, side, side. Does that make sense? So, if all 3 sides are congruent to each other, then they're the same type of triangle. Does that make sense? Okay? Easy, right? Next one. Side, angle, side. Okay? So what that means is, if you have these 2 triangles, okay, and you have a side, and you have an angle, and you have a side, and you have a side, and you have an angle, and you have a side, then that means that these 2 are congruent. Right? Love it. Love it. Okay? You're all doing the work. Is that recording?
Yeah.
Okay.
What does that one mean?
So that means that they're congruent. I call it sass. Right? If it's sassy, then it's congruent. Okay? So, side, angle, side. Side, angle, side. Okay? So they're always kind of touching. When we're talking about these congruent pieces, those congruent pieces are always touching. So when I'm talking about a side and an angle and a side, I'm saying that the 2 sides that make the angle, right? I'm not talking about this angle or that one, okay? These things have to be touching. So with that in mind, angle, angle, side. Okay? As I was saying, this is the as I was saying triangle. Okay? As I was saying, you're going to have 2 triangles, right? And I have an angle, and an angle, and another angle. They don't have to be the same, but these have to be the same, and these have to be the same. And so it goes angle, angle, and then what?
Side.
Side. So then this side has to be congruent to that side. Or, technically that side, right? Could be congruent to this side. Because as long as it goes angle, angle, side. Angle, angle, side. Does that make sense? Okay? Okay? These are congruent. Okay? There's 5 of these. There's 5 of these. Okay? Now, ASA. This is another one. Kind of like NASA, but ASA. Okay? So, as I was saying, right? As I was pushing it, right? Alright. As I was saying, ASA. Oops. Different color, sorry. Okay. Then we have these 2 triangles. Okay. And it goes angle, side, angle. So as long as this angle is congruent to this angle, right? And this side is congruent to this side, right? And this angle is congruent to this angle, okay? Then that's 2 congruent triangles, okay? there's one last one. I'm going to do this one in red because, well, this one's taboo. Okay? Yeah, it's taboo. People don't like, you know, back in my day, we used to call it this, and then as I became a teacher, it was like, ooh, you can't call this that, you know? But do I listen to those rules? Come on now. Now, I know you guys have heard me say, get your angle side out of my classroom sometimes, right? Maybe, sometimes, right? I said, oh, you'll learn about that, and this is when you learn about that. So, angle side, think about that. Angle side, what does that spell? Ass. Yeah. So, but ass doesn't work. Okay? Unless it's right. Okay, so you just got to remember that. It only works if it's right. Ass only works if it's right. What that means is, okay, you have to have a right angle. And so the thing that they're calling it now is they call it HL. Okay? What that is hypotenuse. Remember that word we talked about? Hypotenuse. Oops. Right? Leg. Okay? Hypotenuse leg. The reason I come at you with this is because it's taboo and you remember it. You laugh. You think, oh, and honestly, this is the one the kids remember the most. Okay? But it only works if you have a right angle. Okay? If there's a right angle. Okay? So that means that you have to have a right triangle. Okay? You have to have a right triangle. Okay? And the hypotenuses have to be congruent. Okay? So these, remember these are the hypotenuses, right? The ones opposite. The hypotenuse is opposite, right? So the hypotenuses have to be congruent and one of the legs. It doesn't matter which one. Okay? So one of these legs has to be congruent. If you have a hypotenuse and a leg, and you know it's a right angle, a right triangle, then you have what's called congruency. Okay? Now, those are the 5 things. That's not that bad, right? That's 2 sections. 2 sections. We got one more section, right? This is the hardest one to remember. Okay? The hardest one to remember. It's the easiest one to do, but the hardest one to remember. Okay? Now, since you use one of these, make sure that these are congruent, right? Then you're using what's called congruent C, right? They're congruent. Okay? So, just know that if they're congruent, we can say, hey, if this is congruent, right? Then doesn't that mean that these have to be congruent? Right? Wouldn't that mean that? Okay? And that's what this next one's about. Congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Cpctc. Okay? Congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. That's all that means. Congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So all we're saying is, hey, if I know that these 2 are congruent, then I know that these 2 are congruent. Right? And that's Cpctc. Congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And that's what we'll be doing today. All of those. Okay? And that's your notes for 4, 5, 6, and 7. That's not that bad.